I am a professor from Universidad Autónoma de Madrid in Spain, and I will be delivering this talk entitled "The Slums We Carry Around Inside Us, Every Man's Inner City, the City versus Nature in Saul Bellows' Novels," which is part of the program Cross-Cultural Dialogues, Narratives of Sustainability in the Anthropocene Interdisciplinary Dimensions, offered by Eurasia Foundation from Asia. I really have to thank the foundation for inviting me to give this talk. In the next minutes, I will be talking about the presence of romantic poetry in the Jewish American writer Saul Bellow. Well, here you can see this is what I will be focusing on. First, as you can see in the table of contents, I will make a little introduction to Saul Bellow's background, for those of you who do not know him. This will take up approximately 8 minutes of the talk. Then I will move on to the next part, which will be the bulk of the whole talk, where I will be, as you can see in the table of contents, I will be addressing the presence of the city versus nature through romantic poetry in Saul Bellows. In principle, it will be his 1982 novel, The Dean's December, but I will also make reference to other novels in case there is someone who is interested in this writer. Then I will devote a couple of minutes to focusing on the key ideas of the talk, and there is a last section that we're excited. The sources I have used to prepare this talk, which I hope will be useful for you. Right. Well, last 25th of July 2025, Dr. Asunción López Varela from Universidad Complutense de Madrid in Spain invited me to give a talk to be delivered for the Eurasia Foundation. When she mentioned the theme of the foundation's program, which I read at the beginning of my presentation, the name of the Jewish American writer Saul Bellow immediately came to mind. Bellow is a writer whose works I have been studying for 3 decades. So I thought it would be a perfect context to share my expertise on this author with the Eurasia Foundation's audience. Secondly, since the mid-1990s, I have published several papers and book chapters that I think fit into the program's topic. I could add that 2025, the year when I am giving this talk, marks the 110th anniversary of Bellow's birth and the 20th anniversary of his death. So as you can imagine, I could not think of anything timelier than this talk for the Foundation's program. Well, before starting to address the topic that has brought me here, which, as I said, I insist, at the beginning of my presentation, the influence of romantic poetry on Bellow's The Dean's December, I believe it's more than convenient to say something about Saul Bellow. As you can see on the transparency, he was born of Jewish Russian parents in Lachine, Canada, and he was brought up in Orthodox Judaism, which, contrarily to what happened to many other people, was not a traumatic experience for him. This is what he said about his background in a 1966 interview granted to Nina Steers. Well, you can see this on this transparency, and I will be reading this. I was born into a medieval ghetto in French Canada, Lachine, Quebec. My childhood was in ancient times, which was true of all Orthodox Jews. Every child was immersed in the Old Testament as soon as he could understand anything, so that you began by knowing Genesis in Hebrew by heart at the age of 4. You never got to distinguish between that and the outer world. Well, this is cited at the end of the bibliography, and I will not be making references to this throughout the rest of the presentation, but well, you will see everything referenced throughout my presentation. Right. Okay. Well, this was essentially his life in Canada from the late 1910s to the early 1920s. Then, in 1924, at that time he was 9, he moved with his family to Chicago, and in 1941, he naturalized American. From that time onwards, his life moved from Chicago to New York. In his final years, he settled in Brookline in Boston. Well, for those of you who are interested in a study of Bellows' life and work, well, you can have a look at his biographies, which are referenced on that slide, which, if I am not mistaken, is slide number 4. So Bellows' Jewish background is very, very clear, as you can see. This said, it should be clarified that when he started writing, he decided to leave that world behind, a world he later defined as suffocating orthodoxy. In any case, deeply influenced by his Jewish upbringing, his novels reflect a passion for knowledge to the extent that his encyclopedic books, and in this case, inevitably, his 1964 novel Herzog springs to mind, turn out to be challenging for any reader. Right. Now I would like to move on to Bellows' literary style and influences, which will enable me to start to go into the main topic of this talk. As regards Bellows' literary style, he's clearly a realist writer whose fiction usually presents highbrow characters who are dissatisfied with what they see in the outside world. This is a major reason why they are quite disconnected from the real world and immersed in an intense mental activity that threatens their mental sanity. This is especially true in his first 2 novels, Dangling Man, published in 1944, and The Victim, published 3 years later, where the presence of existentialist writers such as Franz Kafka, Jean-Paul Sartre, and Albert Camus, among others, is quite visible. As you can see, well, I have devoted one study to this issue for those of you who might be interested in this issue. Well, typically the beloved character, and now I am thinking of characters like Augie March, Eugene Henderson, Moses Herzog, Charlie Citrine, Albert Court, and Ben Crader, just to cite a few, needs to go back to nature to come to terms with himself. Um, So staying from the city, which in Bellow's jargon is the moronic inferno, not only serves the Bellovian character, but also favors the Bellovian character, the Bellovian character's eventual redemption. Okay. Now I would like to move on to another key aspect in Bellow's fiction, which has to do with freedom and independence. And in this respect, the influence of Romanticism is crucial. So this attitude underlines Bellow's interest in the human being's freedom and independence, a theme that he began to explore in depth in his third novel, which I have just mentioned, entitled The Adventures of Augie March. It is then that one can start to see the presence of English romantic poets like William Blake and Shelley, among others. The post-romantic Irish poet Yeats, and the American transcendentalists Ralph Waldo Emerson, H.D. Thoreau, and Walt Whitman, well, just among others. It's important to say that for the sake of brevity, just a few examples of romantic poets will be given here. Specifically, William Blake is explicitly and or explicitly mentioned in Henderson the Rain King, in Herzog, in The 13th December, and in More Die of Heartbreak. As far as Shelley is concerned, he's referenced in Herzog and in The 13th December. And as for Williams Wordsworth, he's also present in Herzog and in The 13th December. And Yeats is mentioned in The 13th December. Well, now let's this was a little introduction I wanted to make for those of you who are not so familiar with the fiction of Saul Bellow. Now I would like to focus on what will be the core of this talk, which is the city versus nature through romantic poetry. Looking at how these references, the references I've just mentioned, have helped shape each novel, obviously, and as you can imagine, clearly exceeds the scope of this talk. Therefore, I will focus on analyzing the significance, as you can see there, of William Blake's Then She Bore Pale Desire, Yeats' Sailing to Byzantium, and Shelley's Mont Blanc for Saul Bellow's 13th December. Although, as I said at the beginning of my talk, I will also be making references to other novels. The reason for choosing these poets and these poems is because of the role that returning to nature plays to the advantage of the artist's mental sanity. A topic I firmly believe best fits into the theme of the Foundation's 2025 2026 course. Well, I said before that one of the characteristics of the Bellonian protagonist is his intense mental activity to the extent that it puts his mental sanity at stake. One of the so-called escape valves Bellow's protagonists have is through intense reading, something which eventually leads them to come to terms with themselves. It is in this respect that I will be talking about the role that Romanticism plays in Bellow's protagonist's final redemption. It's important to bear in mind that a key feature of Romanticism is the emphasis it places on the individual's feelings rather than on the power of reason only. In this respect, I have studied this issue in several papers. Just in case you want to have a look, well, you can check them in the bibliography section. So in order to put this into practice, what the artist needs to do is to reconstruct their inner self through the imaginative mind, or to use a phrase that William Blake likes very, very much, the poetic genius. This theme is arguably best addressed in Saul Bellow's Humble's Gift and The Dean's December, as I have studied elsewhere. And as far as the imaginative mind is concerned, a main difficulty the Bellovian protagonist encounters is that it is incompatible with his urban life. Life in a big city provokes alienating effects that push Bellow's protagonists to extreme situations. Their priority then is to get away from that intoxicating life, and the way to achieve their goal is to go back to nature, or at least to flee to a more natural environment. Or, if you like, recovering one's individuality away from society is Bellow's protagonist's target. Now, I would like to address this issue in The Dean's December more specifically. Well, Albert Court, the protagonist of The Dean's December, is a former journalist of the present dean of an unnamed prestigious university of Chicago, who has had to travel to Ceausescu's Bucharest. The reason for this trip is that Court's mother-in-law, Valeria, is dying in hospital. This story takes mostly place in the hero's mind. Now, this is a common trait in other Bellow narratives. Albert Court, and please, the reference to the heart in his surname is not accidental, looks back on his life in violent Chicago with the aim of examining and reflecting on his relationship with that city. Chicago, unlike oppressive, depressive Bucharest, is free but a most dangerous city. The dean, temporarily imprisoned in Bucharest, resorts to the reading of romantic poetry. He's an expert in this matter, as a way to escape from the alienating outside world. He used to read this type of poetry as a teenager, and he has continued to read and reread it until the present time, the early 1980s of the novel. It is small wonder then that this novel is full of references to the poetry of artists such as William Blake, Shelley, Wordsworth, and Yeats, among others. It is important to highlight here the idea of reading poetry as an epitome of culture to fight against the ills of modern society. And in this respect, I think there is a very, very interesting quote which I have included on the transparency that you can see, which I think is number 10. Court had written that perhaps only poetry had the strength to rival the attractions of narcotics, the magnetism of TV, the excitements of sex, or the ecstasies of distraction. As anticipated at the outset of this talk, for reasons of space, a detailed analysis of all the allusions to the Romantics made in The Dean's December, let alone in other Bellows novels, cannot be made. So the focus will be on those references to Romantics who underscore the dangers of civilization and the pressing need to keep away from it in order to come to terms with oneself. In this respect, I find that William Blake's poem, Then She Bore Pale Desire, is a paradigmatic example and an excellent point of departure in our analysis. And here, well, you can see I have, well, for reasons of space, I have not been able to reproduce this as if it was a poem, which is how it is written. Um, and an important thing is when you read this, you will see that well the punctuation is weird. This is exactly how William Blake wrote it, and this is how David Ertman, whose edition I have been following in this respect, has reproduced the text. Right, so it goes like this. Then she bore pale desire, father of curiosity, a virgin ever young, and after, leaden sloth from whom came ignorance, who brought forth wonder. These are the gods which came from fear. For gods like these, nor male nor female, are but single pregnate, or if they list together, mingling bring forth mighty powers. She knew them not yet, they all war with shame and strengthen her weak arm. But pride awoke, nor knew that joy was born, and taking poisonous seed from her own bowels, in the monster shame infused, forth came ambition, crawling like a toad, pride bears it in her bosom, and the gods all bowed to it. So great its power, that pride inspired by its prophetic saw the kingdoms of the world and all their glory. Giants of mighty arm before the flood, Cain's city built with murder. Then Babel mighty reared him to the skies. Babel with thousand tongues, confusion it was called, and given to shame. This pride observing, only grieved, but knew not that. Well, this poem alludes to Babel as a symbol of the fallen world, the world of experience in Blakean terms, and as such, um, the most serious threat for the individual's freedom, which, according to Blake, can only be found in their creative imagination. As I've well written somewhere else, Babel symbolizes captivity and bondage, and is an enemy of the poetic genius. You see, the phrase poetic genius, as I mentioned before, appears here again. This interpretation can be applied to Bellow's Chicago in the Dean's December. And this also applies to other novels where Chicago is depicted like this, novels like Mr. Sandler's Planet, published in 1970. Great. Almost at the end of the Dean's December, Court reflects on how pernicious cities are for human beings. Neither the reference to Blake's line, Cain's city built with murder, nor the repeated use of the term pride can pass unnoticed to us. And this is what I've tried to show in this quote that appears in the Dean's December, which I will be reading for you. But there was plenty of emptiness, as much as you needed to define yourself against, as American souls seemed to do. Cities, this had not impressed on Court when he poured over Blake. Spangler had not stopped him by kidding him about it. Cities were moods, emotional states, for the most part collective distortions, where human beings thrived and suffered, where they invested their souls in pains and pleasures, taking these pleasures and pains as proofs of reality. Thus, Cain's city built with murder, and other cities built with mystery or pride, all of them emotional conditions and great centers of delusion and bondage and death. So there was the emptiness before him, water, and there was the feeling of emptiness behind him, the slums. Great. So the counterpoint to Blake's Babel is Jerusalem, the heavenly city, which epitomizes exactly the opposite, that is, spiritual freedom. And the closest counterpart to this idea I can think of is Yeats' poem Sailing to Byzantium, included in his book of poems, The Tower, which came out in 1928, which we will see in a moment, obviously. Before Court flies to Romania, he has written and published several articles which deal with Chicago, a violent, corrupted, and decadent city. In these articles, he talks about the underclass, referred to as the dying generations. This is an expression that Court has borrowed from precisely from Yeats' poem Sailing to Byzantium, whose first stanza I have included in On My Transparency, which I think is number 13. So the first stanza goes like this. There is no country for old men, the young in one another's arms, birds in the trees, those dying generations of their song. The salmon falls, the mackerel crowded seas, fish, flesh or fowl, commend all summer long, whatever is begotten, born and dies, caught in that sensual musical neglect, monuments of an aging intellect. Yeats felt that if he wanted to escape his mortal condition, he had to leave the country for old men. The Country for Old Men. Probably some of you remember the film, but in this case, it refers to his native Ireland. And he decides to travel to Byzantium, which he regards as the heart of European civilization. And in this case, I believe that Sailing to Byzantium is a case in point of Yeats' idea of a world where there is an ever-present conflict between passion, that is the material world or the world of the senses in Platonic terms, and the spirit. And a second important aspect about Sailing to Byzantium is that it is a lyrical poem about a long ago disappeared civilization. Yeats wrote this four-stanza poem in his old age, this is an important thing to bear in mind, with the intention of presenting Byzantium's former splendor as a place where to find a shelter away from the present-day crumbling world. Well, I have devoted some space to this issue. Great. Well, much the same as the Irish poet, Bellow uses the noun phrase dying generations to underscore the nightmarish Chicagoan society as an epitome of the modern world politicians have turned it into. Bellow's criticism, however, does not stop here. Through his mouthpiece, Albert Court, Bellow denounces that modern technology is a serious threat to the individual's well-being. I find that one of the most illuminating scenes in this novel is a conversation held between the Dean and Voynich Beach, a scientist who has been alerting society about the dangers of lead poisoning. As is well known, exposure to lead seriously affects physical and psychological development. It causes cancer. Well, it has many other side effects. Court, who goes beyond the visible damaging effects, says this. And I have included one of the, what I find, key reflections about this issue. He says, lead is more sinister, maybe because of its color, hue, or weight. Man's great technical works, looming over him, have coated him with deadly metal. We can't carry the weight. The blood is sobbing in us. Our brains grow feebler. This disaster also overtook the Roman Empire. It wasn't the barbarians. It wasn't the Christians. It wasn't moral corruption. Bones from Roman graves do show extreme concentrations of the metal. Well, without underrating the seriousness of lead poisoning, needless to say. I think that the gene sees in this ill a symptom of a deeper disease, the end of philosophy, the end of ideas. Um, this issue appears in Humble's Gift, when the protagonist, Charlie Citrin, tells his girlfriend that the ideas of the last centuries are used up. We will go back to this issue towards the end of this presentation. But there is another novel, his next novel, More Day of Heartbreak, published in 1987, whose background is the 1986 Chernobyl nuclear disaster, where Bellow shows the devastating effects of nuclear energy on human beings' health. Immediately after this tragic accident, a journalist asks Ben Crater, a botanist, about the possible noxious effects of the radiation. As in the case of the Dean's December, Bellow's intention is far from underestimating this situation and answers. It's terribly serious, of course, but I think that more people die of heartbreak than of radiation. Later on, um, Ben's nephew and the narrative's protagonist, Kenneth Trachtenberg, is talking to his girlfriend Trekkie, with whom he has had a daughter, and tells her something that echoes Crater's reply to the journalist. His comment was that more people die of heartbreak than of radiation poisoning. This theme of physical degeneration as a symbol of spiritual decay is central in the Dean's December. Um, um, and in other novels, such as Humble's Gift and More Day of Heartbreak, as I've just mentioned. And this is masterly summarized by Bellow when he refers to, and you can see this on the transparency, um, those slums we carry around inside us, every man's inner city. This is a key element because those slums are not only a physical location, but our state of mind. So it is at this point that Bellow's protagonist finds that the surrounding world too suffocating and feels the pressing need to flee from where he is and go back to nature, where he expects to find the peace of mind he is unable to find in a large metropolis like the Bucharest and the Chicago depicted in the Dean's December. Great. Well, a couple of minutes ago, I established a parallel between Yeats' Sailing to Byzantium and a scene in which Court sees present Chicago and society as a hopeless hope case. There is, however, a big difference between the Irish poet and the American novelist. Unlike Yeats, um, whose poem sounds apocalyptic, Bellow is an affirmative writer who believes in the human being's innate ability to go on. Well, this attitude is precisely what in the end impels Court to leave oppressive Bucharest and make a stopover at the Mount Palomar Observatory, a place which seems to be like a no man's land. Um, it is in this setting that he finds his long desired peace of mind, where he can come to terms with himself away from the moronic inferno, which I mentioned when I referred to how Charlie Citrin in Humble's Gift defines Chicago. So in this respect, I completely agree with Quayum when he claims that Court, like Emerson and Whitman, expresses his vision of union and equilibrium. But not only this. I have analyzed in a 2016 paper This scene, in light of Shelley's ascent to Mont Blanc in his well-known homonymous seven-stanza poem, included in History of a 6 Weeks tour through a part of France, Switzerland, Germany, and Holland. The first stanza is reproduced here, and I will be reading it. The everlasting universe of things flows through the mind and rolls its rapid waves, now dark, now glittering, now reflecting gloom, now lending splendor, where from secret springs the source of human thought its tribute brings of waters with a sound but half its own. Such a feeble brook will oft assume in the wild woods among the mountains lone, where waterfalls around it leap forever, where woods and winds contend, and a vast river over its rocks ceaselessly bursts and raves. In this poem, Shelley presents Mont Blanc, the highest peak in the Alps, as a powerful force of nature that can only be understood in relation to the human mind, that is, imagination. According to Harold Bloom, the poem's subject matter is, as you can see there, the relation between individual mind and the universe, and also the problem of what rules the universe, and to what moral end the relationship of an individual I to a universal thou. The I-thou relationship alludes to the concept of I-it, I-thou relationship of the Jewish Austrian philosopher Martin Buber, as explained in his classic I and Thou, or Ich und Du in its German version. Well, to put it in simple terms, to Buber, we can only establish an I-thou relationship through dialogue. In Shelley's case, the dialogue occurs in a kind of identification between the poet and the mountain. This is the moment when Shelley's alter ego comes to terms with himself. Remember that the phrase coming to terms with oneself is the key issue in Bellow's novels, and for this reason, in this talk. So please do not forget this. So this is the moment when Shelley's alter ego comes to terms with himself, and this is something similar of what happens when Court temporarily stays at Mount Palomar. Like Shelley's poet, the Dean has succeeded in sloughing off that feeling of suffocation he experienced in the city, whether it be in Bucharest or Chicago, and has been able to establish a connection between his inner self and creation. Right. So as you can see now, we will be focusing on spiritual freedom, which is precisely an issue that is perfectly summarized in an interview Bellow granted to Bruce Koch, which I have also reproduced on this slide, which I think is slide 20. It goes like this. Our period has been created by revolutions of all kinds, political, scientific, industrial. And now we have been freed by law from slavery in many of its historical objective forms. The next move is up to us. Each of us has to find an inner law by which we can live. Without this, objective freedom can only destroy us. So the question that really interests me is the question of spiritual freedom in the individual, the power to endure our own humanity. Well, that inner law by which we can live, that Bellow mentions in his interview, appears throughout the adventures of Augie March, Saul Bellow's third novel, as the axial lines. Well, the beginning of the novel shows the protagonist's need to stay away from his hometown, Chicago, in order to preserve his freedom and independence. Well, I have reproduced this part, which is at the outset of the novel, which somehow breaks with his first two novels mentioned at the very beginning of my talk, Dangling Man and the Victim. It goes like this. Um, I am I am an American, Chicago born, Chicago, that somber city, and go at things as I have taught myself, freestyle, and will make the record in my own way. Much the same as in Shelley's case, Bellow's Augie March and Albert Court, among others, obviously, are driven by that inner law which makes them travel to nature, the ideal setting to reach spiritual freedom. Well, you will probably remember that above I retrieved what Charlie Citrine tells his girlfriend Renata in Humble's Gift when he said that the ideas of the last centuries are used up. Well, in Bello, this leads us to the already addressed issue that the human being's spiritual regeneration um, sorry, the regeneration can only be achieved through imagination. In a letter sent to the British philosopher Owen Barfield and dated July 24, 1975, well, this is the same year that Humble's Gift was published. Bellow elaborates on this idea, and well, this is not included on the transparency, but basically, he says that um, he has imagination where others have science, etc. It wasn't until I read your book on Romanticism that I began to understand something about the defeat of imaginative knowledge in modern times. And then, he finishes his idea saying that I concluded that the ideas and modes by which it was represented were exhausted, that individuality had been overwhelmed by power or sociability, by technology and politics. Well, as in the case of the Dean's December, in Humble's Gift, Bellow shows his concern about how society can destroy genius embodied in Charlie Citrine's friend, the ill-fated poet von Humboldt Fleischer, based on the poet Delmo Schwartz. Well, I referred before to Kurt's need to resort to the romantics as a way to cope with his daily, that is difficult, life. Charlie Citrine's romantic approach to life is also worth analyzing. I will be doing this very briefly. The protagonist of Humble's Gift is also romantic in the sense that he sees himself as an artist seeking purity and beauty, not material profit. At the beginning of of the novel, Charlie Citrine, the protagonist and narrator of the story, says what you can see on Transparency. I think it's 22, I think. Money wasn't what I had in mind. Oh God, no. What I wanted was to do good. I was dying to do something good. But such sums as I made themselves. Capitalism made them for dark comical reasons of its own. The world did it. Well, possibly Humble's Gift is the novel in which Bellow best explores the artist's inner struggle between his spiritual realm, where he feels safe, and the outside crumbling material world. In this way, we go back to Blake's Fallen World and to Yeats' Dying Generations, among others. Well, to use a Homeric Platonic image, we could say that the artist seems to be sailing between the Scylla of his world of ideas, the Charybdis of the sensible world. Well, I would like to finish this part of the talk while asking a rhetorical question. Isn't this what highly sensitive people with a rich inner world experience in their daily lives. Well, this is basically my talk, and then, well, in conclusion form, well, I have devoted four transparencies, well, to summarize the main ideas that we have covered in this talk. Well, key themes would be city-induced alienation versus a return to nature. The second one would be the development of poetic genius. Um, um, and number three would be the power of nature. And all this has been done in light of the poetry of Blake, Shelley, and Yeats. Well, this would be, well, basically the thing. And I cannot disregard the last part, works cited. Well, here I have included all the references I have used throughout my talk. I would like to draw your attention to slide 20, 28, which is the one you can see. You will see, although Bellow references, apart from his novels, you have letters. There in letters, you have 60-year period where he exchanged letters with all kinds of people, intellectuals, non-intellectuals, poets, writers, sociologists, all kinds of backgrounds. His first authorized biography, the one by James Atlas, highly recommended. And you also have the two-volume leader biography, which is the latest one. And well, I have also included some of my papers on Bellow. Some of them are open access, so you can. I invite you, to those of you who want to, well, have a look at them. Well, you are more than welcome to do so. And well, this is basically what I wanted to say to you. I want to reiterate my. I want to read. Sorry. I want to. I want to reiterate my big gratitude to Eurasia, the Eurasia Foundation, for inviting me. And I cannot forget my colleague, Dr. Asunción López Varela, who was so kind to invite me on behalf of the foundation to give this talk, which I hope you have enjoyed. Since the presentation will be at your disposal, there you can find my contact email address for anything you may need. I am Gustavo Sánchez-Canales. I insist. I work at the Universidad Autónoma de Madrid. And for those of you who might be interested, I teach nowadays. I teach English and children's literature, but for years at Complutense University, I taught Anglo-American literature, and that's why one of my lines of research has to do with Jewish American literature. Saul Bellow is one of my interests in terms of research. And I also, have interest in academic writing and children's literature as a research area. So for those of you who might be interested, I will be more than happy to share what you might need in this respect. Okay, well, thank you very much, and well, as I said, I'm at your complete disposal for anything you may need. Thank you very much.